Hello, everybody. It's me, Carmine DeStefano, your bookman, and I have finally finished Resident Evil Requiem. I know it's over a month since other people have finished it, more or less. But this is my review of the game. I have to admit, great game, man. Really enjoyed it. Now, in case you're wondering about my credentials, I've been playing Resident Evil since the very first game, and I can freely admit, unlike all these so called influencers, that the only draw to the PlayStation consoles had been the Resident Evil games. That's pretty much it. And this is no exception. This is definitely one of the best Resident Evil games I've ever played. I played on the Switch too, the greatest console of all time. And you can tell right here, this is a recording. This isn't even my live footage from my television in my docked mode. The game runs perfectly fine. It looks perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It really was a nice balance between the traditional survival horror and the third-person shooter jamboree that it became over time. I did appreciate the differentiation, even in the zombies themselves, and your abilities increasing with all the steroids and the stabilizers that you were able to construct on your own or find, as only Grace herself. The different characters too, and the fact that there are two endings, options, folks, and that's one of the things that I do appreciate in video games. That's what gives it some replay value, that and quality. The game runs very well. It doesn't really have any kind of hiccups. Towards the end, there may be a little bit of stutter effects in certain areas. I don't know if that's bad design or whatever, but for the most part, the game looks perfectly fine. It runs well. It does hit the same tropes that Resident Evil games hit. It's almost as if, because Biohazard originally was called Resident Evil Biohazard, and then they kind of unofficially called it 7 Biohazard, and then it just became known as 7. But really what it comes down to is Resident Evil 7 was sort of a reset. This game kind of resets it again from Village, which was more like run and gun, 6, 5, maybe even 4. But this kind of brings it back to where you're in a creepy mansion that has weird themes and stuff that you have to overcome. You have to find certain items. You have to do mixing and matching, all that other stuff. And then it also turns on the third person, but there is still a very strong survival horror aspect when you're playing as Leon. So it doesn't really make a mess of anything. It doesn't turn into a completely different game. In fact, one of the complaints that I can give about the game itself is there is a scenario towards the end where you would really benefit from far better third-person controls than what you get in this game as Leon. And instead, you're playing this sort of survival horror third person where you don't really have cover and you can do stealth kills, but they're so hard to pull off because you're being seen from everybody if you go out in the open or whatever. Now, you can utilize gas pumps that can blind everybody in the area. And you can also use a liquor, as they have returned, in order for you to distract them. But for the most part, third-person shooters have cover stick and things like that, which make it easier for you. They also allow you to aim better and quicker. With this game, there's that delay where you're aiming at an elite guard who's covered in armor, and you have a bit of like a second even for them to spot you before you can clearly aim where you've been aiming the whole time. Yeah, so that it doesn't lend itself to good third-person controls. But the overall game itself doesn't suffer from that one sequence. Grace, as a character, is a very intriguing character. I mentioned that there was a video which titled, she claims herself that she stutters when she's nervous. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's what they were going with. But for the most part, the character herself, she's a very nice-looking woman. No problem with that. Especially when she's dressed as the lady from Village, from what I've seen. And Leon is Leon, but with the ending that I chose, and I don't want to give it away, I don't want to tell you that Leon doesn't survive, but I'm not going to tell you that he does either. So, pretty much a puzzle, like a Resident Evil puzzle. Somebody complained about the puzzle itself or the puzzle aspects. Since the first one, there were a lot of those puzzles that could more or less be summarized as switch, mix and match, move this here. That was pretty much it. There were a few later on that could make you think, but from what I can see, this is the most labyrinthian version of maps this game has ever had. So finding your way is more or less the puzzle, because typically the areas, and I know Village opened it up a little bit more, but the areas in Resident Evil are a lot smaller. And it comes down to, did I miss something in a previous room that would have helped me move on to the next room? You don't really have, especially when you get the map, too much to think about in terms of where you're going next. This game, it really makes you wonder, especially when it adds the element of monstrosities for Grace, because as Grace, you have really 2 or 3 weapon options. Shitty knives, a shitty handgun, and you get Requiem, which is, I think it's the Magnum. I don't even know. It could be that, but it's really big. It's like a 55 caliber. It's huge. And it more or less can destroy everything in sight. However, I didn't realize that I needed a certain blood sample to study and unlock another aspect of the crafting mechanic that she has, which involves infected blood for some weird reason. And I wasn't able to craft Requiem bullets, but I really only would have been able to craft 4. So I barely used the gun that, it's not what the game is named after, but the name of the gun is in the game. It's referencing something else. Now, as I mentioned, I have played pretty much every Resident Evil game. Mainline game, yes. There are a lot of spin-offs I haven't seen. Well, I haven't played myself, but I have watched complete walkthroughs of, which could be themselves summed up as here today, forgotten tomorrow. They were not all that interesting, and they sure as hell didn't help the lore of this entire franchise. This one simplifies it a little bit more, but I've heard people complain about the plot. Can I tell you, folks, if you know anything about Resident Evil, you know that the plot is about survival. That's the main idea. The story threads and details themselves are batshit insane. Since the second one, you had to fight a doctor who injected himself with a more jacked up version of the original virus as he transforms into some tyrant with eyeballs all over him and eventually becomes a giant mutated turtle. So I'm sorry to tell you, if you want to nitpick every last detail of the storyline from the very beginning to the end, you're more or less grasping at straws to nitpick something that was an enjoyable experience. Listen, I'm very, very picky when it comes to video games and whether or not they're fun to play, especially when it comes to a series that I've been a fan of since the beginning, and especially when it comes to so-called AAA titles, and especially picky about that, because the whole idea of turning video games into wannabe movies has completely irritated me beyond anything that I can really explain at this point. The internet, more or less, I'm done with, and all the stupid-ass opinions from pretentious rich kids who think that because their mommies and daddies said they're cool when they were children, that everything that they proclaim is fact. And since all they do is complain and repeat each other, you got to hear it 1,000 times over. This is a perfectly fine game. It is a lot of fun. It plays extremely well on the Switch too, especially in dock mode. There is really nothing you can bitch about other than what I already bitched about, where towards the end, things get a little bit too complicated and too difficult to get through, to the point where you almost become somewhat dejected and you probably wouldn't get through it. But really, they are challenges, and I put it on the modern difficulty, which I guess is hard difficult. I don't even know. The classic difficulty, you would walk slower and you'd have to use everything in reverse of what it really was originally meant for. Whatever the case, I put it on modern difficulty, and I still had a little bit of trouble. There were only specific scenarios that cost me way too much of my time. So I can't say that the experience itself wasn't enjoyable throughout the entirety of the game. The setting was nice. Everything about it screams fear. It's kind of troubling for me after the winter we've had here, now that we're in the spring, for me to play a game that's set in like October, because then it brings me back to what gave me like PTSD from all the blizzards and frigid temperatures and snow that we've just finally got through. And it's cold today, in case you're wondering, because winter will just not let us go. But for the most part, and now this dick is doing his fucking housework or whatever the hell they've been doing upstairs, so I'm going to try to sum this up pretty quick. For the most part, the game is incredibly enjoyable. It really is. The one other issue that I have with modern so-called AAA games is if you go to my gaming channel, CD Bookman Gaming, for those of you that don't know, it's right here on my main homepage. But if you go to my gaming channel, just look at the thumbnails. These come from the game itself. Then do me a favor and look at the thumbnails from Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, Age of Imprisonment, all the Nintendo exclusive games that I've been playing on the Switch too. Look at all of the so-called AAA thumbnails, with the only exception being Street Fighter 6, strangely enough, made by the same company. And just tell me what you notice. I'll give you a hint. Color. There is no color. And you know what color is part of? Graphics. Why do video games in the AAA space have to be so fucking ugly? Why? Put some color in there. I get it. It's survival horror. I get it. It's supposed to be desolate. It's supposed to be unnerving. But you can do that with some vibrant colors. It doesn't have to be so drab and gray and black. And look at this. It's the same two colors. Just have some life in your games. Make them fun. Make them enjoyable. But the thing about Capcom is they still can bring it when it comes to fun experiences. Would I play this game again? Absolutely. Get the second ending. Those little bits that somebody was complaining about, the motorcycle thing takes like 2.5 minutes. I don't give a shit. Infinite ammo, Uzi, and shooting dogs and fighting Dr. Gideon, who wasn't much of a character to begin with. Like, since the beginning, he barely shows up. Killing him off quick, whatever, man. Throw him off a crevasse into absolutely nothingness. Cool, that's how you kill these undead guys. But the whole thing with the orphanage, that you have a PC mod to make sure that you get through it, yeah, you don't really need to. When you know what you're doing, it takes like 5 minutes. These are not really big deterrents from the game itself. The concept of survival horror is well done, especially when you're Grace and her little handgun and her little makeshift knife and her Requiem you can't use, or when you're fighting as Leon and you're going through waves of enemies that are a lot more jacked up, and you've got shotguns and you could buy new weapons and ammo and everything. And to be fair, the BSAA version of the merchants from Village and 4, or even the, what do you call it? The area, the shop. Oh, look, I missed one of those bobbleheads. The shops from 5 and 6, where you can upgrade weapons and everything. It seems like it comes really late in the game. You've got a lot more to go when you get to that point. Not more than halfway through, but it's still, you still have time, and it comes back to assist you throughout. In fact, I didn't have anything really to upgrade or whatever with all the points I was getting. So there's really nothing wrong with the game itself. It was very, very fun. It was really enjoyable. It's just drab and what have you. But the character designs are okay. Grace is a very lovely young woman. Her mother was pretty damn hot. So I have no problem with any of that. But as somebody who's been playing this series, yes, I definitely suggest it for those of you that are Resident Evil fans. It is not a nostalgia bait. It can't be bait if you're already bit, baby, all right? There are lickers. There are tyrant types. There's a Mr. X. Yes, because it's still Umbrella. And they still make bioweapons. And the bioweapons would still be the ones that typically work. What's the problem? They're upgraded versions. I don't see an issue with fighting the same enemies you fought before, or an issue with going back to the Raccoon Police Department or having a battle with Mr. X. None of that's a problem. It doesn't deter from the game. There's nothing wrong with it. And as I said, it's not nostalgia bait if you already bought the game, which many people have. So if you're a Resident Evil fan, definitely I would tell you to check it out. If you're a survival horror fan, it's not so gory and it's not about killing people or zombies or whatever and eviscerating them in so many different disgusting ways that all these other copycats, including Capcom with Dead Island and all that shit that they've been doing, it's not as bad as that. It really kind of makes it simplified so that you can feel the atmosphere and everything. So if you like those survival horror games, definitely suggest it. If you like third-person shooters, it does require precise controls and it will challenge you in terms of shooting enemies in the right spots. So you would probably like it as well. And if this is just not your thing, if you don't like violent games or whatever, yeah, stay away from that. This game is fucking visceral. So if blood or whatever makes you queasy, this is not the game for you. Otherwise, yeah, I think you would really enjoy it, especially on the Switch too. And thank you all for watching. I have more views to come, so stay tuned, take care, and have a great day.